From the twisted minds that brought you Saw 4, 5, 6, and 7, the Feast Trilogy, Piranha 3 Double D, and we're going to bring us Final Destination 6, Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan present The Collector. And I'm going to do The Collection also in the next video. So, yeah, The Collector, 2009. This was originally supposed to be a prequel to Saw, but that did not happen, so they just decided to make it its own movie and create a new horror icon out of it. This movie stars Josh Stewart as our main protagonist, Arkin, and the plot goes as follows. Desperate to repay his debt to his ex-wife, an ex-con plans a heist at his new employer's country home, unaware that a second criminal has also targeted the property. So getting into what I like about the movie is the concept, I think, is just fresh and brilliant. Home invasion meets Saw. And I love Josh Stewart as our protagonist. I think he is just badass in this one and the next one. And he's someone that you can root for. You understand why he's doing this. Like, he's kind of a bad guy, but he's also the hero, because he's a thief, but we understand why he needs the money. And when there's a little girl in trouble and he makes it out, he goes back in to save her. So he's not a piece of shit who's just going to let some little girl die. There's some pretty cool shots and visuals in the movie, and this was Marcus Dunstan's directorial debut, and what a way to start. Like, this has some pretty cool shots in it, and it's very stylized. It also has a pretty cool score. It kind of has some Carpenter-esque moments in it. I like the intensity of it, and it just really complements the film. I really like the look of our killer in the movie. He has no name, he's just the Collector, and he wears this mask that kind of looks like a robber's ski mask, but it's like leather. I'm not sure what kind of mask it is, but you like tie it in the back, but it looks pretty cool, and he has like these contacts in his eyes that make them kind of glow white in the middle, which is pretty interesting. And if you want some gruesome, gory kills, this movie has it, and it also has some of that Saw torture in it, because like I said, this was kind of supposed to be like a Saw prequel, so it has some of the Saw torture in it, but it doesn't linger too much on it. It's not Hostel-like. It kind of goes there in one scene, but then it quickly ends, so it's not too hard to watch. It's not too over the top. And I just thought the writing overall was pretty clever. It has a great pace. Once things get going, it just never really lets up. It never gets dry. You're never bored with this location. It has some good atmosphere. I like, like I said, the style. It has some stylish direction, and it's just very fun. Getting into what I don't like about the movie is the opening could have been more exciting. It's just very quick and generic. Nothing, you never see anything really happen. So there's no traps either, which is odd. They just walk upstairs and there's a chest, and then someone gets captured off camera. It's like, well, where's the traps that we see later on in the movie? So that whole opening could have been much better. And this movie's transfer is really grainy. My DVD of part 2 looks better than this. Like, they purposely, I guess, made it look this way, but it just looks very distracting. And I also don't like that it looks so much like the Saw sequels. It has that green and yellow hues in a lot of the scenes where it just looks distracting also. And it's like, I wish they could have made it look much better and not so Saw-like. There's a few CGI insect shots that weren't really necessary. You could have just used real insects in those moments. But that's just a little nitpick. And you do have to suspend disbelief in this movie. I'm not going to lie. Like, this guy sets up these traps that are very elaborate. They get more elaborate in part 2, in the opening especially. But, it's just a little unbelievable. Like, how quickly and quietly he seems to set up all these traps when Arkin gets there. He walks in, there's nothing there really, but then he walks downstairs 5 minutes later, and now there's like 4 deadbolts on the door and shit everywhere. So final thoughts, this is a fun, kick-ass home invasion mixed with Saw horror movie with a likable protagonist who's just as tough and cool as its villain. It's a one-setting horror movie that never gets boring, and it just builds the intensity throughout to its beautiful ending. So when it comes to The Collector, I'm giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, spoilers. So the wife in the opening, she is the biker girl in Feast 2 or Feast 3. And the guy in the gas mask, was he the killer? We never see his face and he never speaks. I'm thinking that guy with the mask on outside of home who gives Arkin like the thumbs up. I'm thinking that probably is the killer. We get our quick story set up here. The guy needs money. His ex-wife, played by the woman in Wrong Turn 2. I think The Hills Have Eyes 2 also. She needs money, so he's gonna go steal money at the house for the loan sharks, and he's only gonna get 40% of the cut. And the guy, the husband, somehow escapes, or maybe the bad guy let him escape so that he could go bump into his elaborate traps everywhere. The guy grabs like the golf club and it like pulls him down the hall and drops him on the staircase. And then Arkin goes to pick up the phone and there's like a nail in it. So he puts it up against his ear, he stabs himself in the ear, and then he puts his hand through the boarded up windows and there's like razors there. So once his hand goes through, it's like he has to, when he pulls it out, it's stuck on the razor, so it's scraping his skin off of his hand. So that was pretty gruesome. And it's like, when did he have time to do all this shit? Because like I said, when he walks in, it looks like there's nothing around. And now there's nails all over the stairs. There's wires in that one room all spread out like a spider web. Like, where did this shit come from? He did it so quietly. And were these traps meant for Arkin? Or were they meant for the parents? When he gets there, the parents are already tied up in the basement and captured. So was he going to let them go at some point to go upstairs and get caught in one of his traps? Or did he quickly set those things up after Arkin broke in? If that's the case, like I said, it's too quick to set up all that shit just for Arkin. I'm thinking maybe it was already there. It would make more sense that way. And somehow he just didn't see all that shit walking in. And then it was meant for the parents and the daughter, who I guess the killer knew was going to come home at some point. Who keeps a gun in the safe with no bullets in it and doesn't even have bullets in the house? That's pretty stupid. The whole bait thing, taking one person from one house and then bringing them to the next, doesn't really make much sense, but it's really only here to set up the next movie, because if the killer didn't do this, there would be no reason to capture Arkin at the end and bring him back in part 2. He just would have killed him in the ambulance. So I get why it's here, but it doesn't really make sense that, like, how is he bait? How is that going to work? Why do you need bait? They're just going to walk through their house and fall into one of his traps. They don't need the bait, really. It's kind of funny and fucked up at the same time that Arkin saves the cat only to kill it. It's stuck in this hot slime for like insects to get stuck in, and he picks up the cat and throws it at the window, and then it sets off like this guillotine thing and it chops the cat right in half. Then we see that the killer just tied up the husband like an animal to be butchered and gutted him like a pig. He didn't fall into some trap and get killed that way. I guess the killer just gave up on him. He didn't release him again to fall into some other trap like the golf club thing. He's just like, I'm done with you, and gutted him. And then the wife says something very funny. She's like, I prepared myself mentally for rape and robbery, but not this. How do you prepare for rape? Then when the wife sees that her husband's been killed, she like panics and runs upstairs and she gets shanked in the stomach like multiple times. And you think she's dead, but she's still alive, only to get her mouth sewn shut in a bathtub filled with gasoline. And then I guess eventually she just bleeds out. Then the daughter and the boyfriend arrive, and the killer purposely like unlocks all the doors just to let them in. And then I really like how this scene plays out. You're just kind of like guessing like, what trap are they going to bump into? They almost bump into this trap and that one, and then eventually they see the killer watching them make out. They're about to have sex on like the island bar, and we get some boobies, and then the boyfriend gets his hand stabbed right through the knuckles, and then the killer pushes him into this other trap, and the machete comes down and chops off his fingers. Then he kicks him, and then he lands in that room of bear traps, and they all go off, hitting his arms, legs, his chest, and then the final one just hits his face. That was fucking cool. That was a pretty badass kill, and man, did it look great. Then the daughter gets captured at one moment, tied up with barbed wire. The Arkin goes and saves her, and what does she do? This little ungrateful brat tries to kill him. I guess she thinks that he's the one that is the killer for some reason, that he's working with him. I don't know, but she just grabs the shears and it's setting off this trap, and she gets thrown up against a wall of nails. So I guess she ended up not getting nailed by her boyfriend, but nailed by the killer. Then at the worst moment, the little girl finally shows up. Like, she's been hiding the whole time and never spoke up when Arkin was around. And it's like, really? Come on. Like, I just escaped. Now I gotta go back in and be a hero. We get a shot that pays homage to Jack Torrance in The Shining when he's banging on the door, the camera underneath looking up as he's hitting the door, the killer. And then they try to set up this elaborate, like, fish tank trap to electrocute the killer, but the killer outsmarts them and uses the guy from the opening as like a battering ram and breaks the door open with his head and throws him in the water and electrocutes him instead. That was pretty cool. And then Arkin gets like a fish hook in his eye, and then he gets knocked out and captured, and he's being tortured in the basement. He's trying to put cockroaches in his stomach, but then the cops show up to save the day, quote unquote. But then, of course, the cop gets killed by the dog outside. The dog just bites his throat out. Then Arkin frees himself from these hooks, kind of like the guy in Saw 3, all these like hooks and fishing hooks, I guess, on his hands and his back. Then he kills the dog. Pretty funny, like how he did it. He was so quick on his feet. He just grabs like toilet paper, lights it on fire, puts it in a trash can. And the dog runs head first into the burning trash can, and then throws the dead dog at the collector, and he shoots his own dog in half. And then we get kind of a quick but cool choreographed, well choreographed fight, and kicks the bad guy down the stairs. They run out. He gets hit by the cop. Gets ran over, but he's still alive. Man, he's one tough son of a bitch. And then when you think the day is over, he's getting out. It's not midnight yet. He can still make the deadline and get the money to the loan shark. The ambulance gets ran over and tipped over, and the inside shot of the ambulance as it's flipping over was pretty cool how that was done. And then he just gets captured. But, the little girl is at least safe, but Arkin is not. He gets put in the chest and then taken into the city for part 2. And what about his daughter and his wife? Did they get killed by the loan sharks? We shall find out in part 2. And yeah, the end shot shows the whole city, setting up the sequel where it takes place in the city, only in the opening though, not the whole movie. So yeah, that is my thoughts on The Collector. What are your thoughts on The Collector? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's all an opinion. You don't need to get butthurt about it.